May 23rd, 1942, 11:47 p.m. 3 miles off the Ambrose Light, New York Harbor. The diesel engines cut to idle. Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Hardegen grips the cold steel of the attack periscope, his knuckles white in the red glow of U-123's control room. Salt water drips from his leather jacket. The air reeks of sweat, fuel oil, and the metallic tang of 40 men breathing the same recycled oxygen for 6 weeks straight. He rotates the periscope slowly, clockwise, scanning, and then he sees it. The Manhattan skyline blazes against the night like a jeweled crown. Every window lit, every street lamp burning, every skyscraper outlined in electric fire. The Chrysler Building pierces the darkness like a cathedral spire. Times Square glows with such intensity he can read the theatre marquees through the lens. Broadway is hosting a show. The city that should be cowering in darkness is throwing a party. Hardigan's breath catches. He'd surfaced U-123 dozens of times along the American coast during Operation Drumbeat, Die Paukenschlag, the drumbeat offensive that was supposed to bring America to its knees. In 4 months he'd sent 22 Allied ships to the bottom. Tankers, freighters, cargo vessels hemorrhaging oil and supplies into the Atlantic. The American coastline had been a shooting gallery, but this is different. Oberleutnant Hoffmann, Hardegen says quietly, never taking his eye from the periscope. Come see this. His first officer climbs the ladder, boots clanging on wet metal. Hardegen steps aside. Hoffmann leans into the eyepiece. 10 seconds of silence. Mein Gott, Hoffmann whispers. Through the periscope, they watch a passenger liner, fully illuminated, portholes glowing like a string of pearls, glide into harbour as if the war is happening on another planet. Civilian traffic moves freely. Tugboats chug past with navigation lights blazing. A ferry crosses towards Staten Island, its decks visible under bright interior lights. Not a single blackout curtain. Not a single air raid siren. Not one sign that America believes it's in danger. Hardegen served in the Kriegsmarine since 1933. He survived the British blockade, the Arctic convoys, the Mediterranean gauntlet. He knows what a nation at war looks like. He's seen Hamburg under blackout. Entire blocks of buildings swallowed by darkness. Mothers taping newspaper over windows. Children stumbling through streets lit only by moonlight. Berlin went dark in 1939 and never lit up again. But New York? New York looks like it's hosting the World's Fair. Hardegen orders U-123 to surface fully. The diesels rumble to life, charging batteries. He climbs through the conning tower hatch and steps onto the wet deck, filling his lungs with air that doesn't taste like metal and diesel. The Atlantic wind hits his face. He pulls out his Zeiss binoculars. To the north, the George Washington Bridge, every suspension cable outlined in lights. To the south, the Statue of Liberty, floodlit and defiant. Beyond the harbour, an industrial complex stretching along the New Jersey shore. Foundries, factories, refineries, each one burning through the night shift. Smokestacks exhale columns of white steam into the sky. He counts them. 12, 15, 20, 30. He stops counting, and then he sees the ships. Dozens of them. Cargo vessels, tankers, troop transports lined up in the harbour like toys in a bathtub. He can see welders working on hull repairs, sparks raining down in golden showers. A Liberty ship, one of America's mass-produced cargo haulers, sits in a floating dry dock, crawling with workers even at midnight. They're building ships faster than he can sink them. Hardegen lowers the binoculars slowly. He thinks about the U-boat pens in Lorient, the constant RAF bombing, the craters, the twisted steel, the blackened concrete. He thinks about the rationing cards his wife showed him on his last leave. 200 grams of meat per week, 50 grams of butter, ersatz coffee made from acorns. He thinks about the briefings in Lorient, where Admiral Dönitz stood before maps and graphs, explaining how the U-boats would starve Britain, cripple America, turn the tide of the war. How every ton of shipping sent to the bottom brought the Reich closer to victory. But standing here, 3 miles from the most powerful city on earth, watching it burn electricity like oxygen, Hardegen feels something cold settle into his chest. It's not fear, it's mathematics. Hardegen trains his binoculars north, toward the industrial waterfront of Brooklyn and Queens. The scene unfolding before him defies every strategic calculation he's ever been taught. The Brooklyn Navy Yard sprawls across the coastline like a small city, and it's operating at full capacity. Even through the salt haze, he can see the skeletal frames of warships under construction. Gantry cranes swing steel plates through the air. Arc welders throw cascades of white sparks that look like fireworks from this distance. Shift whistles blow. Workers pour out of one gate as the next shift floods in. They're building around the clock. He sweeps the binoculars west, across the Hudson. The shipyards of New Jersey stretch for miles. Kearney, Hoboken, Bayonne, each one a hive of construction. He can make out the distinctive shapes of destroyers, escort carriers, even the massive hull of what looks like a battleship. The welding torches create constellations of light along the waterfront, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each one representing a warship being hammered into existence while he watches. Hoffman climbs onto the deck beside him, vapour condensing from his breath in the cool night air. "They're not even hiding it," Hoffman says, his voice hollow. "They want us to see this." Hardegen doesn't respond. He's calculating. U-123 carries 14 torpedoes. In 4 months of Operation Drumbeat, the entire U-boat fleet, operating at the peak of its effectiveness, sank roughly 400 ships along the American coast. It was the most successful U-boat offensive of the war. The Americans called it the Second Happy Time. Dönitz called it a triumph. But 400 ships? Hardegen is looking at a nation that can build 400 ships before Christmas. He lowers the binoculars and pulls a small leather journal from his jacket, the patrol log where he records observations for Kriegsmarine intelligence. His hands are steady as he writes by the dim red light of a shielded torch. Operational observation, 23rd May 1942, 23:15 hours. Manhattan Island fully illuminated. No blackout measures observed. Civilian maritime traffic unrestricted. Industrial facilities operating at night capacity. Estimate 30-plus major production centres visible from single vantage point. Shipyard activity suggests serial production at unprecedented scale. He pauses, pen hovering over paper. What he wants to write, what he knows to be true, cannot fit in an operational report. Germany has been at war for 3 years. Every factory, every rail line, every ounce of steel is devoted to the war machine. The entire hussy runs on captured French oil, Romanian petroleum, and synthetic fuel plants that the RAF bombs every other week. Food is rationed. Rubber is rationed. Copper is being stripped from church bells. And still, Germany cannot produce enough ammunition, enough tanks, enough aircraft to fight on 3 fronts. But America hasn't even broken a sweat. The country he's looking at entered the war 6 months ago. 6 months. And already the industrial mobilization makes Germany's total war economy look like a cottage industry. The lights burning across Manhattan aren't defiance, they're indifference. America can afford to leave the lights on because it has so much electricity, so much coal, so much oil that conservation isn't even a consideration. "Kapitän," Hoffman says quietly, "we should submerge. There could be patrol aircraft." Hardegen almost laughs. "Patrol aircraft?" "Yes. The Americans have those too. Hundreds of them probably. Maybe thousands. Built in factories he can see from here, fueled by refineries burning through the night, flown by pilots trained at airfields carved out of farmland in places called Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas, states larger than Germany itself. He thinks about his last briefing with Admiral Dönitz 3 months ago in Lorient. Dönitz had spread the charts across the table, submarine positions, convoy routes, tonnage calculations. We need to sink 700,000 tons per month, Dönitz had said, his finger tracing lines across the Atlantic. That's the threshold. If we maintain that rate, we cut the supply line. We starve Britain. We keep America's war material on the wrong side of the ocean. 700,000 tons per month. Hardegen is looking at shipyards that can probably build 700,000 tons before summer. A police boat appears in the distance, spotlight sweeping the water. Routine harbour patrol, not even looking for submarines, just checking for drunk fishermen and smugglers. "Take her down," Hardegen orders. 60 metres, course 180. The deck crew scrambles below. Hardegen takes one last look at the skyline, the impossible, blazing, arrogant skyline, and drops through the hatch. The diesels cut, the electric motors hum. Water rushes over the hull as U-123 slips beneath the surface. In the control room, the crew waits for orders. Hardegen stares at the depth gauge, watching the needle climb. 30 metres, 40, 50. He's 29 years old. He's one of the Kriegsmarine's top aces. He wears the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. When he returns to Lorient, there will be ceremonies, promotions, champagne salvaged from captured French stockpiles. But standing in this tin tube, 60 metres beneath the capital of American industrial power, Reinhard Hardegen knows something that admirals and generals and Führer won't accept for 3 more years. The war is already over. Germany just doesn't know it yet. June 9th, 1942. U-boat headquarters, Lorient, France. Hardegen stands at attention in Admiral Karl Dönitz's office, the Knight's Cross heavy against his chest. Through the reinforced windows he can see the massive concrete U-boat pens, 30-foot thick roofs designed to withstand RAF bombing. Outside, work crews shovel rubble from last night's air raid. Dönitz sits behind a desk covered in charts and intercepts, his face carved from stone and fatigue. The Admiral has aged 10 years in 2. He commands the most successful submarine fleet in naval history, and it's slowly bleeding to death in the Atlantic. "Your patrol report," Dönitz says, tapping the document with one finger. "You observed New York Harbour for 17 minutes. "Yes, Herr Admiral." "And you recorded this." Dönitz reads from the page. "Industrial capacity appears to exceed all previous intelligence estimates by order of magnitude." "What does that mean, Kapitänleutnant?" Hardegen chooses his words carefully. "It means, sir, that the enemy's production capability has been fundamentally underestimated." Dönitz leans back in his chair. The leather creaks. "The Abwehr estimates American shipyard capacity at 4 million tons per year. You're suggesting this is incorrect?" "I'm suggesting, Herr Admiral, that I watch them build ships faster than we can sink them." Silence fills the room like water filling a breached compartment. Dönitz stands, walks to the window. He's 50 years old, a veteran of the First War, a submariner who understands the mathematics of attrition better than any officer in the Kriegsmarine. He built the U-boat arm from 30 boats to 300. He perfected the Wolfpack tactics that nearly brought Britain to starvation in 1941. But even Dönitz cannot alter basic arithmetic. "We sank 3.2 million tons of Allied shipping in the first 5 months of this year," Dönitz says, his voice measured. "That's more than the entire merchant fleet of Italy, more than Japan sank in all of 1941. Operation Drumbeat alone accounted for 600,000 tons, Hardegen finishes. "I know, sir. I sank 22 of those ships myself." "Then you understand we're winning." "No, sir." The words come out before Hardegen can stop them. "I understand we're sinking ships. That's not the same thing." Dönitz turns from the window. His expression is unreadable. "Explain." Hardegen steps to the map table where coloured pins mark U-boat positions across the Atlantic. Red pins for confirmed kills. Black pins for boats lost. There are too many black pins. "The Americans are building Liberty ships in 42 days, Hardegen says. "I confirmed this with intelligence intercepts during my last patrol. 42 days from keel laying to launch. They have 18 shipyards capable of this production rate." He pulls a pencil from the map table, scribbles numbers on a notepad. 18 yards, one ship every 42 days. That's one ship every 2.3 days per yard. Multiply across all 18 facilities. He underlines the final number. That's 233 cargo ships per year, just from the Liberty ship program alone, not counting tankers, destroyers, carriers, or any other vessel type. Dönitz studies the numbers, his jaw tightens. And we have 40 operational boats in the Atlantic at any given time, Hardegen continues. Each boat carries, on average, 12 torpedoes. If every torpedo hits, which they don't, and every target sinks, which they don't, that's 480 ships we can theoretically kill per major operation. He sets the pencil down. Sir, they're building faster than we can kill, and that's just cargo ships. I saw 3 aircraft carriers under construction in New York Harbor alone. 3. We've lost Graf Zeppelin. We'll never finish her. The Italians can barely keep their fleet fueled. But the Americans, Hardegen's voice drops. They're building a navy larger than the entire Kriegsmarine while their cities leave the lights on. The office falls silent except for the distant rumble of a crane moving outside. Dönitz walks back to his desk, sits heavily. For a long moment he simply stares at Hardegen's calculations. When he finally speaks, his voice carries the weight of a man who sees the future and cannot change it. You're one of my best commanders, Hardegen. You've achieved what most U-boat captains only dream of. But you're young. You haven't seen how wars turn. You don't understand. I understand, sir, that I watched New York Harbor for 17 minutes and counted industrial output that exceeds the entire Ruhr Valley. I understand that while German families ration butter, American soldiers eat chocolate bars as field rations. I understand. Enough. The word cuts like a hatch slamming shut. Dönitz stands again, hands clasped behind his back, the posture of a man carrying orders he cannot refuse and truths he cannot speak. Your observations will be forwarded to OKW intelligence, he says formally. You will not discuss these conclusions with other commanders. You will not mention American industrial capacity in front of the crew. You will accept your promotion to Korvettenkapitän and take command of U-415 for the next patrol cycle. And if I'm right, sir, Dönitz meets his eyes, then we fight anyway, Kapitän, because that's what we do. We're submariners. We go into the dark water and we make them pay for every metre of ocean. We sink ships until there are no more torpedoes, and then we surface and use the deck gun, and when the ammunition runs out, we ram them if we have to. He walks to the door, opens it, a dismissal. But we don't surrender, and we don't stop, not while there's a U-boat left that can dive. Hardegen salutes, turns to leave. Hardegen. He stops at the threshold. Dönitz's voice is barely a whisper. How long do you think we have? Hardegen considers the question. The shipyards, the factories, the lights of Manhattan burning like a bonfire visible from 3 miles at sea. 2 years, sir, maybe 3, and then they'll have so many ships, so many aircraft, so many tanks that it won't matter how brave we are or how well we fight. They'll bury us under the weight of production. Dönitz nods slowly as if Hardegen has simply confirmed what he already knew. Then we make them pay for every day of those 2 years. Dismissed. Hardegen walks out into the French sunlight, past the U-boat pens, past the crews loading torpedoes and provisions for patrols they may not return from. He thinks about the men who will die in those boats. He thinks about the mathematics of annihilation. And he knows, with the certainty of a man who has seen the future through a periscope lens, that bravery cannot sink a nation that builds ships faster than you can kill them. August 1942, North Atlantic, 400 miles east of Newfoundland. U-415 rocks in 12-foot swells, diesel engines coughing black smoke into grey skies. Korvettenkapitän Reinhard Hardegen stands in the conning tower, binoculars pressed against his face, scanning an empty horizon. 23 days at sea, 0 kills. The Atlantic has changed. 3 months ago, during Operation Drumbeat, convoys moved like wounded animals, scattered, poorly defended, easy prey. Hardegen had surfaced U-123 at night, and picked off tankers like target practice. Ships burned on the horizon. Oil slicks stretched for miles. The Americans called it the torpedo junction. Now the convoys move in tight formations, surrounded by destroyers and corvettes bristling with radar. Air patrols sweep the sea lanes every 4 hours. The Americans have deployed something new, high-frequency direction finding, which the British call huff-duff, that can triangulate a U-boat's position the instant it transmits a radio signal. The hunting ground has become a killing field. Herr Kaliu, the radioman's voice crackles through the voice tube. BDU transmission. Wolfpack Lowe's is engaging convoy ONS 122. Course 095. Speed 8 knots. Hardegen checks his charts. The convoy is 6 hours away at flank speed. He calculates fuel consumption, torpedo inventory, the position of known destroyer groups. All ahead full, he orders. Bearing 095, rig for depth charge. The crew moves like a machine. They've done this 40 times. They know the rhythm: sprint to intercept, submerge before visual contact, creep into firing position, shoot, dive deep, pray the depth charges miss. If they're lucky, they sink one ship before the escorts arrive. If they're unlucky, they become one of the black pins on Dunitz's map. 6 hours later, U-415 runs submerged at periscope depth, electric motors whispering. Through the attack scope, Hardegen watches the convoy materialise through rain squalls. 30 cargo ships in 6 columns, surrounded by 8 destroyers making aggressive zigzag patterns. He identifies the targets: 3 Liberty ships, 2 tankers, a mix of older freighters, all of them riding low in the water, heavy with cargo, trucks, tanks, aircraft, steel, rubber, everything Britain needs to stay in the war. Everything Germany's running out of. Range to lead ship? 2,000 metres, Herr Kaleu. Prepare tubes 1 through 4, solution on the lead Liberty ship. The fire control team works in whispered efficiency. Gyro angles, torpedo speed, target bearing. The calculations that turn physics into death. Hardegen watches the convoy through the scope. The Liberty ship, he can read her name now, James B. Weaver, ploughs through the swells with the graceless determination of mass-produced functionality. She's ugly, welded instead of riveted, built by workers who probably never saw a ship before 1941. And she's exactly the problem, because behind the James B. Weaver are 2 more Liberty ships, and behind them 2 more. And in American shipyards right now, at this exact moment, another 18 Liberty ships are sliding down the ways into the water. Tube 1 ready, Herr Kaleu. Hardegen watches a destroyer cut across the convoy's flank, ASDIC pinging, active sonar. They know U-boats are in the area. They're hunting. Solution locked. Ja, Herr Kaleu. His finger rests on the firing button. 1 torpedo, 1 ship, maybe 5,000 tons of supplies sent to the bottom. A pinprick, a gesture, a mathematical irrelevance in a war being decided by industrial capacity. The destroyer turns toward U-415's position. Did they hear the motors? Catch a shadow on the ASDIC? Or just luck? Destroyer bearing red 45, closing fast. Hold fire, take her deep, all ahead full, rig for silent running. The periscope hisses down. The boat angles into a dive. 40 metres, 60, 80. The crew freezes in place, barely breathing. Every man knows the mathematics of this moment. Water pressure increases by 1 atmosphere every 10 metres. At 100 metres, the hull groans under pressure. At 200 metres, rivets pop like gunshots. The convoy passes overhead, a sound like distant thunder, propellers churning water into chaos. And then, the destroyers. Ping, ping, ping. Active sonar hammering against U-415's hull. The sound echoes through the pressure hull like someone striking a bell with a hammer. Every ping is a targeting solution being refined. Every echo brings the depth charges closer. Destroyer directly above, Herr Kaleu. Hardegen grips the periscope housing. 90 metres. The boat is already deeper than recommended depth. He can hear the hull plates creaking, metal flexing under pressure. Splash, splash, Splash! The sound of depth charges hitting water. Brace for impact! The first explosion hits like the fist of God. The boat lurches sideways. Light bulbs shatter. Cork insulation rains from the overhead. A pipe bursts, spraying seawater into the control room. Men slam against equipment. The deck tilts 30 degrees. Wham! 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 3 more charges detonate in rapid succession, close enough that the shockwaves feel like being inside a kicked drum. The depth gauge shatters. An electrical panel explodes in sparks. Someone screams. Flooding in the aft torpedo room! Seal the compartment! Hydraulics failure on the dive planes! Switch to manual! The destroyer makes another pass. More splashes, more charges. The boat drops to 110 metres, well past crush depth, and the hull groans like a dying animal. A seam splits near the pressure door. Water sprays in a needle-thin jet that could cut flesh. Hardegen forces his voice to remain calm. All stop! Silent running! Rig for depth! The electric motors die. U-415 drifts in absolute silence except for the drip of water and the ragged breathing of 47 men waiting to die. Above them, the destroyer circles. Ping, ping, ping. Minutes crawl past like hours. The destroyer moves away. The sonar pings grow fainter. The convoy noise fades to silence. Hardegen counts to 600, 10 full minutes, before he speaks. Damage report. The litany comes back. Hydraulic system damaged. Aft torpedo room flooded. 1 motor mount cracked. Main battery leaking chlorine gas. Half the food stores contaminated with seawater. 0 torpedoes fired. 0 ships sunk, and they're lucky to be alive. September 1942. Lorient, France. U-boat bunker 3. Hardegen sits in the officers' mess, a glass of schnapps untouched on the scarred wooden table. Around him, other commanders trade stories. Near misses, successful kills, the eternal dark humour of men who live in steel coffins. Korvettenkapitän Heinrich Lehmann Willenbrock holds court at the far end, describing how he sank 4 ships from convoy SC-94. The other officers raise their glasses. Someone plays a battered accordion. For a moment, the concrete bunker almost feels warm. Hardegen says nothing. He's studying the casualty board on the wall, a wooden plaque where brass nameplates mark U-boats lost. When he left for his last patrol in May, there were 43 plates. Now there are 68. 25 boats gone in 4 months. U-85, sunk by the destroyer Roper off the Carolinas. U-352, depth charged off Cape Lookout. U-701, caught on the surface by an Army Air Corps bomber. U-166, destroyed in the Gulf of Mexico. U-5 and 76, killed by a Navy Kingfisher that shouldn't have even been a threat. The names accumulate like water rising in a flooded compartment. Hardegen, Lehmann Willenbrock calls out. You're quiet tonight. Not celebrating your Knight's Cross with oak leaves? Hardegen touches the decoration at his throat. Cold metal that means he's killed enough ships to earn recognition. Just thinking, Heinrich. Dangerous habit for a submariner. Laughter ripples through the room. Drink. Tomorrow we go back out and tomorrow's problems can wait for tomorrow. But Hardegen can't stop calculating. 25 boats lost. Average crew, 48 men. That's 1,200 submariners dead in 4 months. The Kriegsmarine is training replacements as fast as possible, but training takes 9 months. You can't compress the experience of diving to 100 metres in a storm, or firing a torpedo spread at a moving target, or surviving a depth charge attack that turns your world into thunder and chaos. Meanwhile, American destroyer production? He's seen the intelligence estimates. The Americans commissioned 18 destroyers in July alone. 18 in 1 month, each one equipped with radar, sonar, Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars, and crews trained in schools that didn't exist 2 years ago. The mathematics are simple and brutal. Germany is losing U-boats faster than it can build them. America is building escorts faster than U-boats can sink them. It's not a war anymore. It's arithmetic. The door opens. A messenger steps in. Too young, barely 18, still carrying the nervous energy of someone who hasn't learned to be afraid yet. Kapitän Hardegen, Admiral Dönitz requests your presence. Immediately. The room goes quiet. Immediate summons from BDU are rarely good news. Hardegen follows the messenger through the concrete corridors of the bunker complex, past crews loading provisions, past mechanics repairing diesel engines, past the smell of oil and sweat, and the peculiar metallic scent that clings to submarines like a second skin. Dönitz's office is exactly as Hardegen remembers: maps, charts, the weight of command compressed into reinforced concrete and cigarette smoke. But Dönitz himself looks different. The Admiral has aged. Deep lines cut across his forehead. His eyes carry the exhaustion of a man who sends 40 boats to sea each month knowing that 10 won't come back. He's fighting the Atlantic with courage and tactics and determination, and he's losing to production capacity and industrial mathematics. Sit, Dönitz says. Hardegen sits. Dönitz slides a folder across the desk. British Admiralty documents, captured from a torpedoed convoy escort. Intelligence estimates. Ship production figures. The numbers are stamped "Most Secret" in English. Read page 7. Hardegen flips through the folder. Page 7 is a typed memorandum from the British Ministry of War Transport, dated August 15th, 1942. American shipyard production for Q3, 1942 exceeds all projections. Liberty ship program now averaging 39 days per vessel across all yards. Total projected annual capacity, 8 million deadweight tons. Recommend immediate revision of convoy scheduling to accommodate increased availability of merchant hulls. Hardegen reads it twice. 8 million tons per year. The U-boat fleet, all of it, operating at maximum efficiency with every torpedo hitting, can sink maybe 4 million tons annually. And that's theoretical. In practice, with missed shots, mechanical failures, and boats lost to depth charges, the real number is closer to 3 million. They're building twice as fast as we can sink, Hardegen says quietly. 3 times, Dönitz corrects. That figure doesn't include tanker production, which is on a separate schedule, or escort carriers, or destroyers, or the fact that the Americans are also building ships for the British, the Soviets, and anyone else who asks. Dönitz lights a cigarette, his hand steady despite the tremor in his voice. I've submitted this intelligence to OKW. 3 times. Each time, I'm told that the numbers must be wrong, that the British are inflating figures to boost morale, that American industrial capacity cannot possibly be this large. He exhales smoke toward the concrete ceiling. But you've seen it, Hardegen. You stood 3 miles off Manhattan and watched them build ships while the city slept. You know these numbers aren't exaggerated. If anything, they're conservative. Then why? Hardegen stops himself. Why keep fighting? Why send men into the Atlantic to die for mathematics that don't add up? Why load torpedoes and diesel fuel and provisions into boats that will sink convoy escorts and cargo ships, and still lose the war 1 decimal point at a time? Dönitz answers the unspoken question. Because the Führer has ordered the U-boat war to continue. Because the alternative is to tell every family in Germany that their sons are dying for nothing. Because surrender is not a word that exists in our vocabulary. He stubs out the cigarette. And because, Kapitän, we are submariners, we don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because fighting is what we do. We go into the darkness and we make them pay for every meter of ocean, and we come back, if we're lucky, and we do it again. Hardegen thinks about U-415, damaged and patched, preparing for another patrol. He thinks about the crew, young men who believe in him, who trust that his experience will bring them home. He thinks about the convoy he didn't attack, the torpedoes he didn't fire, the calculations he can't stop making. How long? Hardegen asks. How long what? How long before the numbers become impossible? Before we run out of boats, or fuel, or men who believe we can still win? Dönitz stands, walks to the map on the wall, the Atlantic covered in pins and pencil marks, and the ghost traces of supply routes. We're already there, Kapitan. We just haven't admitted it yet. He turns back to Hardegen. U-415 sails in 4 days. You'll join Wolfpack Panther, operating southwest of Iceland. The convoys are heavily defended now, but they still move, and as long as they move, we hunt them. Even if, especially if, Dönitz interrupts. Because the day we stop hunting is the day we admit that German courage means nothing against American factories, and I'm not ready to admit that. Not while there's a U-boat that can dive and a torpedo that can fire. Hardegen stands, salutes. At the door, he pauses. Admiral, when I saw New York Harbor, when I counted those smokestacks and shipyards, I knew we'd already lost, but I also knew something else. What? That it wouldn't matter, that we'd fight anyway, because that's what men do when the mathematics say they should surrender, they fight. Dönitz's expression doesn't change. Then you understand perfectly. Dismissed. November 1942, North Atlantic, 520 miles south of Iceland. The storm hits at 0400 hours. 30-foot waves crash over U-415's bow, turning the world into chaos. Black water and grey sky and wind that screams through the conning tower like a living thing. Hardegen clings to the bridge rail, safety harness cutting into his ribs, salt water filling his mouth every time he breathes. Lookouts below, clear the bridge. The watch crew scrambles through the hatch. Hardegen takes one last look at the horizon, nothing but mountains of water in every direction, and drops into the tower. The hatch slams shut. The locking wheel spins. Inside the pressure hull, the boat pitches like a carnival ride. Men grab whatever they can, pipes, valve wheels, each other, as U-415 climbs a wave, hangs suspended at the crest, then plunges into the trough with a violence that feels like hitting concrete. Depth? 20 meters, Herr Kalou. Bow angle 12 degrees down. The boat corkscrews through the storm. Dishes shatter in the galley. Someone vomits. The smell of diesel fuel and unwashed bodies and fear intensifies with every roll. Take her to 40 meters, level trim. The dive planes respond. U-415 sinks beneath the storm into the relative calm of deeper water. The violence decreases but doesn't stop. The ocean moves even here, a slow rolling that makes men who've been at sea for 40 days steady on their feet while new crew members turn green. Hardegen moves through the boat, checking compartments. The forward torpedo room, 4 weapons loaded, 2 men sleeping in bunks suspended between the torpedoes. The crew quarters, hammocks swaying, personal photographs taped to the hull, girlfriends, wives, mothers waiting in cities that don't exist anymore. Hamburg is rubble. Cologne is burning. Berlin is being systematically dismantled by RAF bombers that fly higher and faster than anything the Luftwaffe can intercept. But down here, 40 meters beneath the storm, the war is just mathematics and diesel engines and the constant fight against the water that wants to crush them. Herr Kalou, the radio man's voice cuts through the boat. BDU transmission, priority 1. Hardegen returns to the radio room, a closet-sized space crammed with equipment and codebooks, and the radio man hunched over his notepad transcribing. The message is short. Convoy HX-217 located. Position 58N 35W, course 045, speed 9 knots. Wolfpack Panther order to intercept. Expected contact 1800 hours. Priority tankers Hals- und Beinbruch, BDU ends. Hals- und Beinbruch, break your neck and leg. The submariner's good luck wish. Hardegen plots the intercept course. 6 hours at maximum submerged speed, which will drain the batteries and force them to surface in hostile waters to recharge. The convoy is moving northeast toward Britain, probably 40 or 50 ships, definitely heavily escorted. This is what they came for. This is what the mathematics demand. Navigator, plot intercept course. Chief, Give me maximum speed on the electric motors. I want every amp the batteries can give. The crew moves into action. Men who were sleeping moments ago are suddenly alert, checking torpedo tubes, testing fire control systems, running through the practiced choreography of hunting. Because this is what submariners do. They hunt. 17:30 hours. U-415 runs at periscope depth, electric motors barely whispering. Through the attack periscope, Hardegen sees them. 43 merchant ships arranged in 8 columns, ploughing through grey seas under grey skies. The convoy stretches across 3 miles of ocean. Liberty ships, tankers, freighters, troop transports. And surrounding them, 12 destroyers making aggressive zigzag patterns, radar antennas rotating, depth charge racks loaded. Count 9 escorts on the perimeter, Hardegen reports. 3 more screening ahead. Air cover. Wait. He rotates the periscope. There, a dark shape against the clouds. A consolidated B-24 Liberator, flying lazy circles over the convoy. The Americans have extended their air cover range with new long-range patrol bombers. There are no gaps anymore. No black pits in mid-Atlantic where U-boats can surface safely. Every metre of ocean is watched. Aircraft at bearing 270. 8,000 metres. Can we reach attack position, Herr Callot? Hardegen studies the geometry. The convoy is moving at 9 knots. U-415 can make 7 knots submerged, for maybe 90 minutes before the batteries die. The destroyers are positioned to catch exactly this kind of approach. And somewhere out there, invisible in the grey water, are 5 other U-boats from Wolfpack Panther, all trying to do the same thing: penetrate the screen, fire torpedoes, sink ships, survive. The odds of success? Maybe 1 in 3. The odds of survival? Worse. Chief, how are the batteries? 60%, Herr Callot. Maybe 2 hours at current speed. 2 hours. Enough to reach firing position, shoot and run. Not enough to escape if things go wrong. Hardegen watches the convoy through the periscope. He can identify individual ships now. The Benjamin Harrison, a Liberty ship riding low with cargo. The SO Baton Rouge, a T2 tanker filled with aviation fuel. The City of Canton, an older freighter probably carrying steel or machinery. Each one represents thousands of tons of supplies that won't reach Britain if he does his job. Each one represents dozens of merchant sailors who will die if his torpedoes run true. And behind each one, in American shipyards right now, are 2 more ships being welded together to replace it. Fire control solution on the lead tanker. Range 3,000 meters, Herr Callot. Speed 9 knots, bearing steady. Tubes 1 and 2 ready. Ready, Herr Callot. His hand rests on the firing mechanism. 2 torpedoes, 2 chances, maybe 10,000 tons sunk if he's lucky. And in exchange, his position revealed, depth charges incoming, batteries draining, 47 men depending on his decisions to stay alive. The mathematics don't care about courage. The mathematics only care about production capacity. But Kapitän Reinhard Hardegen, who stood 3 miles off Manhattan and saw the future, isn't firing torpedoes because he thinks he can win the war. He's firing because the alternative is to surface Radio Berlin and tell them that German submariners have surrendered to arithmetic. Standby tubes 1 and 2. The crew freezes, 47 men holding their breath. Through the periscope, the SO Baton Rouge fills his vision. Ugly, functional, mass-produced, and absolutely essential to Britain's survival. Fire 1. The boat shudders. Compressed air hisses. The torpedo launches. Fire 2. Another shudder. Another launch. Both torpedoes running true, Herr Callot. Take her deep, all ahead, full. Rig for depth charge. Bring her to 100 meters. The periscope hisses down. The boat angles into a dive. The stopwatch in Hardegen's mind counts seconds. 30, 45, 60. Boom! The explosion echoes through the water, a sound like thunder trapped underwater. 1 hit, maybe 2. Hardegen can't tell. And then, the destroyers. He can hear them through the hull, propellers accelerating, converging on U-415's last known position. ASDIC pinging, depth charge splashes. Brace for... The first charge detonates. The boat lurches sideways. Men slam against bulkheads. Light bulbs shatter. Cork rains from the ceiling. Wham! 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 4 more in rapid succession, closer than before. A pipe joint splits. Water sprays. Someone screams damage reports. The deck tilts. Flooding in the bilge! Pump failure on number 2! Switch to manual! Hydraulic pressure dropping! Another pattern of depth charges. The hull groans, metal flexes. At 130 metres, U-415 is well past design depth. Every rivet, every weld, every seam is holding back pressure that wants to collapse the boat like a tin can. Hardegen grips the periscope housing and forces his voice to remain calm. Damage report. The litany comes. Minor flooding, electrical damage, 1 motor mount cracked, batteries leaking. But they're alive. For now. Above them, the destroyers circle like sharks, dropping charge after charge after charge, turning the ocean into a killing zone. And Hardegen thinks, 1 tanker sunk. Maybe, if both torpedoes hit, if the ship actually went down instead of just being damaged. 1 tanker. Replaceable in 42 days. This is what victory looks like when you're losing. March 1943. Lorient, France. 4 months later. U-415 limps into port trailing oil and failure. 56 days at sea. 3 convoys engaged. 0 confirmed kills. Hardegen stands on the conning tower as tugboats guide the damaged submarine into the bunker, watching the concrete walls slide past like the entrance to a tomb. The crew emerges onto the deck, gaunt, bearded, hollow-eyed men who smell like diesel and desperation. On the pier, a small crowd waits. No band, no champagne, no ceremonies. Just Dönitz, standing alone in his leather coat, hands clasped behind his back. The boat ties up. Hardegen crosses the gangway. His legs are unsteady on solid ground. 56 days in a rocking steel tube makes the earth feel wrong. He salutes. Dönitz returns it. Walk with me, Kapitän. They move through the bunker complex, past U-boats in various states of repair. Welders throw sparks. Mechanics curse at diesel engines. The smell of metal and paint and oil hangs in the air like incense. Dönitz doesn't speak until they reach the outer seawall, where grey Atlantic waves crash against concrete, and the wind carries salt in the distant rumble of RAF bombers somewhere over the horizon. In February, Dönitz finally says, we lost 19 boats. 19, U-201, U-225, U-529, U-623. He recites the numbers like a prayer for the dead. 300 men, gone. Most of them didn't even get to fire a torpedo. He lights a cigarette, hands cupped against the wind. And our kills? 34 ships, less than 2 ships per boat lost. The mathematics have inverted, Kapitän. We're dying faster than they're sinking. Hardegen says nothing. The wind pulls at his leather jacket. The Americans have deployed something new, Dönitz continues. Escort carriers, small aircraft carriers that travel with the convoys. Now they have air cover in the mid-Atlantic. There are no more gaps, no more safe zones. Every convoy has destroyers, corvettes, aircraft, and radar that can detect a surfaced U-boat at 20 kilometres. He takes a long drag on the cigarette. We're being hunted to extinction. Hardegen watches a wave explode against the seawall, white foam reaching toward the sky before falling back. He thinks about the crew of U-415, young men who followed his orders through depth charge attacks and storms and the grinding exhaustion of 56 days submerged. Men who trusted him to bring them home. 7 of them didn't make it back. Torpedoman Friedrich Weber, killed when a depth charge ruptured the aft torpedo tube and seawater flooded the compartment in seconds. 3 engine room mechanics, crushed when a boiler mount failed during a crash dive. 2 deck crew, washed overboard during a surface attack when a destroyer appeared out of fog, and they had 30 seconds to dive or die. 7 men, for 0 kills. "They're recalling me," Hardegen says quietly. Dönitz nods. "You, Lehmann Willenbrock, Kretschmer, all the veteran commanders, the Knights Cross-holders, the aces." He flicks ash into the wind. "Goering wants propaganda officers. Goebbels wants heroes to tour factories and tell workers that the U-boats are winning. The Fuhrer wants anyone with decorations reassigned to training new crews. And the new crews will die faster than the old ones, because they don't have your experience, your instincts, your ability to smell a destroyer before the ASDIC pings. They have 12 weeks of training and orders to sink ships that are now protected by technology we can't counter." Dönitz drops the cigarette, crushes it under his boot. "You were right, Kapitän. That night you stood off Manhattan. You saw what I refused to believe. The war was already over. We just didn't have the courage to admit it." "Then why?" "Because courage is all we have left." Dönitz's voice hardens. "Because 900 U-boats are still at sea, and 9,000 men still believe that their sacrifice matters. Because the moment we stop fighting, the moment we admit that American factories have made German bravery irrelevant, is the moment we betray every man who went into the dark water and didn't come back." He turns to face Hardegen directly. "You'll be reassigned to the training flotilla in Kiel. You'll teach navigation, tactics, torpedo calculations, everything you learned staying alive while better men died, and you'll watch 18-year-old boys with 3 months of experience climb into boats and sail west into an ocean that's become a killing field. And that's supposed to matter?" "No," Dönitz says simply, "but it's what we do, because we're submariners, and submariners don't surrender. They fight until the water crushes them, or the depth charges kill them, or they run out of torpedoes, and then they fight anyway." April 1945. Kiel, Germany. 2 years later. Kapitän Reinhard Hardegen stands in the ruins of the training facility, watching black smoke rise from the naval yards. Soviet artillery rumbles in the east. American bombers drone overhead in formations so large they blot out the sun. The U-boat war is over, 700 boats lost, 30,000 men dead. The highest casualty rate of any military branch in the war, 75%. 3 out of every 4 submariners who went to sea never came home. And the convoys, they never stopped moving. Britain never starved. The supplies kept flowing. The American factories kept building. Liberty ships and destroyers and aircraft carriers and tanks and trucks and ammunition, in quantities that turned the European theatre into an avalanche of material that buried the Wehrmacht under its weight. Hardegen was right. The mathematics were always against them. A young signals officer, barely 20, too young to have served on patrol, approaches with a message flimsy. "Herr Korvettenkapitän," from Admiral Dönitz. Hardegen reads it. "All U-boats cease hostilities. Surface and proceed to nearest Allied port. Black flag. Regenbogen cancelled. The war is over. Dönitz. Regenbogen. Rainbow. The code name for the order to scuttle all U-boats rather than surrender them. Dönitz has countermanded it. The boats will surface, run up black flags of surrender, and hand themselves over to the enemy." The officer waits for orders. Hardegen folds the message carefully, tucks it in his pocket. "Acknowledge receipt. Transmit to all boats still at sea. Zu Befehl, Herr Korvettenkapitän." The officer salutes and leaves. Hardegen walks to the edge of the dock, where a damaged U-boat sits half submerged, abandoned, forgotten, just another piece of scrap metal waiting for salvage crews that will never come. He thinks about U-123, his first command, the boat he took to New York Harbor in 1942. He thinks about standing on that deck, 3 miles from Manhattan, watching the lights blaze while his own country cowered in darkness. He thinks about the moment he understood, with perfect, terrible clarity, that Germany had already lost the war. 3 years ago. 3 years of fighting. 3 years of depth charges and torpedoes and young men dying in steel coffins at the bottom of the Atlantic. 3 years of pretending that courage could sink an enemy that built ships faster than you could kill them. The mathematics were always clear, they just didn't have the wisdom to accept them. Somewhere in the ruins behind him, someone is playing a harmonica, a melancholy tune that drifts across the water. A few sailors stand nearby, smoking captured American cigarettes, waiting for orders that don't matter anymore. Hardegen pulls out his patrol log, the leather journal he's carried through every mission. He flips to the entry from May 23rd, 1942. The observation that started everything. Manhattan Island fully illuminated, no blackout measures observed, industrial facilities operating at night capacity. He reads the words he wrote 3 years ago and thinks about everything that happened after. The patrols, the depth charges, the men lost, the convoys that never stopped moving, the factories that never stopped building, the war that was already over before most of Germany understood it had begun. A rating approaches. Herr Kapitän, the lorries are here to evacuate the base. Hardegen closes the journal. 5 minutes. The rating nods and withdraws. Reinhard Hardegen stands at the edge of the ruined pier, watching the smoke rise from keel, and thinks about the mathematics of annihilation. About how wars are won not with courage or tactics or determination, but with production capacity and industrial might, and the ability to replace losses faster than the enemy can inflict them. About how he knew this 3 years ago, standing 3 miles off Manhattan, counting smokestacks and shipyards, and the blazing lights of a nation that didn't even pretend to be afraid. About how none of it mattered, because submariners don't fight because they think they can win. They fight because it's what submariners do. They go into the dark water. They face impossible odds. They die at rates that would break any other service, and they do it anyway, because sometimes courage isn't about winning. Sometimes courage is about fighting, even when the mathematics say you've already lost. Hardegen tucks the journal into his jacket and walks toward the waiting lorries. Behind him, the Atlantic waves crash against concrete. The same waves that carried U-123 to New York. The same waves that swallowed 700 U-boats and 30,000 men. The same waves that will keep moving long after everyone forgets that German submariners once believed they could win a war against American factories. The mathematics were always clear, they just didn't have the wisdom to stop.